Hello and welcome to Entrepreneur TV. I am your co-host, Velma Gallant. Super excited to have you here today. We have an amazing topic coming up today. We are talking about from money to meaning. What would it be like if you could create money and have meaning while you're doing it? Our special guest today is Grant Hunter. So Grant is a serial entrepreneur with over 25 years experience in the US, Japan, and Peru. Based out of Silicon Valley, he's been involved in a variety of e-business activities for a Fortune 500 company, and a boutique marketing startup he helped launch and later sell in San Francisco called Inbox Marketing. And in his role as founder and CEO of Micro Franchise Solutions, MFS. It was through MFS that he promoted replicable enterprise solutions to poverty in the developing world in Peru and over 30 countries. Deeper purpose has been the through line of his own evolution in his role as a social entrepreneur over the last 10 years, and now working with companies as a purpose and impact advisor at Syntropy. I should have asked you how to pronounce that, but I think I got it right.
You got it right.
And that's where he helps others lead lives of purpose, authenticity, and service. And as all of you know, that is the backbone of what entrepreneur means. That's exactly why we do things the way we do them. So, welcome to the call, Grant.
Thank you, Velma. I really appreciate it. I feel like I'm amongst kindred spirits here with fellow heart-based entrepreneurs here at Heartpreneurs. So thrilled to talk about my book and the work that I'm doing in the world.
Without a doubt. And you mentioned your book, so I'm going to share what that is. Actually, I'm going to do it this way. Book from money to meaning. I'm just going to put the first bit on there.
Okay.
And so let's put that up here because I can show these things. It's from money to meaning. And the tagline for that is building purposeful business for a life of contribution. And I love that title. I am all about contribution. It is why I exist in this world. Is I'm here to make a difference. And if we are out there in our businesses making that difference, being the contribution, there's nothing better. It's yes, our products are a contribution, but what I'm kind of getting from what you're sharing here is there's more to it than just being a contribution through our products. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah, indeed. I mean, by the time I was 29 years old, I had after graduate school and a short stint overseas, I was back in Silicon Valley, and I had sort of made it by mainstream standards. 6-figure salary, just got a recent promotion, and I should have felt completely fulfilled. But there was a sense of, like a dog chasing a car when it finally catches a car, it doesn't know what to do with it, and it just kind of sits there and it feels rather shallow. So until we can bring deeper purpose and more of a heart to the work we're doing, it can feel often lacking.
Absolutely. Okay, so tell me just a little bit. So I want to understand, because you said you promoted replicable enterprise solutions to poverty in the developing world in Peru and over 30 countries. What do you mean by that? I want to understand that.
Sure. Well, as I sort of foreshadowed at the beginning, by the time I was working in Silicon Valley in a Fortune 500 high-tech company, and I had just gotten a raise, promotion. I had sort of, quote, made it, right, by mainstream standards at a certain point, and it all felt rather hollow to me. And I took a short sabbatical from that work, and I was down. Actually did a 3-day juice fast, went and did a bunch of hot yoga, and was surfing down in North San Diego County. And I had a spiritual awakening, essentially. And that awakening really to the sacredness of all of life made me rethink how I wanted to work in business in the world. And because I was working in the context of business, mainstream business at that point, kind of the riddle for me to solve was, how do I sort of interpret the awakening to sort of the sacredness of all of life through the lens of business? And what I came up with was this notion of social entrepreneurship. And as I began digging into that, I connected with people that were creating enterprise solutions to poverty in the developing world. And I read a book a long time ago called The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. And it was written by a University of Michigan professor named C.K. Pralahad. And he threw out a statistic that still sticks to me this day. And this was probably written in the 90s, I think, mid 90s. And, he pointed out that there's 4 billion people that live on less than $2 a day in the world. And while most people think that's horrific and an incredible injustice, it's also a huge market opportunity. I mean, it's a $5 trillion a year market. And so the question became, how do we aggregate demand in such a way that we can serve low-income people in emerging markets profitably and promote local small business ownership such that we can help those people there who need it the most to lift themselves up out of poverty? And in that vein, and wearing my social entrepreneur hat, I took a research trip down to Peru, where I had never been, to look at the informal economy and to look at how low-income people are making a living. And through this model of business called a micro franchise, we all know what franchises are. Many people have a negative connotation with those. They imagine, golden arches for as far as the eye can see. But in terms of a replication strategy, franchise businesses, whether we're talking about a McDonald's or a Holiday Inn or what have you, they come with not only centralized marketing and training support, but the benefit of a brand that people can lean on and trust. And in the informal economy, the idea of a micro franchise is a business that can usually support one entrepreneur, but can impact up to 5 entrepreneurs. This notion of micro scale is the idea of 1 to 5 people are impacted by it. So the idea of a micro franchise is a locally owned small business that has the capacity to lift an entrepreneur and his immediate family out of poverty for good. And so that was the lens through which I explored the informal economy. And mind you, in Latin America in particular, I know Latin America better than other areas, but roughly 90% of the economy is informal. That is, no business rules, no licenses, no taxes. It's kind of Wild West feel, right? So low-income people in particular are, maybe it's somebody with a basket of fruit trying to make enough money to put food on the table that night. And that's about as far ahead as any of them are thinking. But at any rate, I wanted to do more than that. I believe that the franchise model had the capacity to provide what was so sorely lacking amongst low-income entrepreneurs, many of them so-called forced entrepreneurs, people that maybe didn't want to be an entrepreneur, but didn't have any other job prospects. And so they had to do what they had to do. And to bring that kind of level of sophistication and the notion of local ownership combined with centralized branding, marketing, and support was really powerful. And the first concept that I created was called Taxi Excel. And that was a network of eco-friendly, locally owned taxis in Lima, Peru. And that model had a few things to it that are worth noting. The idea is that I wanted to have a business that could generate enough money to be able to lift low-income people into the middle class in the economy in which they were working, which in Peru, at what lower rungs of middle class in Peru is if you could get somebody who, after all their expenses, had $500 in their pocket every month, that was doing pretty well. And to get to that they needed to be able to pay off the loan, for the business, which in this case was an eco-friendly taxi, within 4 years through the revenue generated through the business. And those two pieces were sort of the lens through which I evaluated scores of different possible business models. And in Peru, those numbers panned out with regards to helping low-income taxi drivers improve their lot in life. And so we created Taxi Excel, and we included all the things that you think of when you think of franchising: centralized brand building, training, and support. They had uniforms, they had, standard operating procedures, documented processes. We had technology involved. We could track the taxis as they moved throughout the streets of Lima through GPS support. We had theft protection on the vehicles, geofencing in the city of Lima, so that if it was ever stolen, we could recuperate the vehicle, and we had to do that a couple times. And defensive and invasive driver training, basic English, routine car maintenance. So we put all the systems together, and then I would come, mostly because I'm here in Silicon Valley, to other socially minded investors and say, look, I have a genuine solution to poverty in the developing world. I will pay you 12%, and you'll get your money back in 4 years, and you'll be able to lift a family and out of poverty for good. And the idea was you could actually build equity in a business, build ownership, and everyone here in the entrepreneur community, they're entrepreneurial. They understand the power of having control of your own destiny. And we could push some of that down to low-income people. So the first concept that I launched through Micro Franchise Solutions was Taxi Excel. And that was the win-win-win. Taxistas, the taxi drivers won, the local market won with a better brand, and socially minded investors could earn, at the time, 30-year stock market average returns with a socially minded investment that had the capacity to lift people out of poverty for good.
Wow. Like I'm really moved by this. I had goosebumps when you were sharing about your awareness of the sacredness of life and that experience that you had. I really love how while it's not simple, it is simple. That, like each little taxi is its own McDonald's.
Right.
Right. And I love, because again, it's not just it's not creating dependency, it's creating independence and interdependence. So the collaboration and the independence and the freedom, and like the whole concept of the micro franchise is just amazing. I really love what you created there with respect to that. So
and that wasn't the end. That was just the first one down there. I also, after taxis, I pushed into the renewable energy space. There's, 1 billion people live without access to any electricity at all around the world. And with a tech-oriented partner, I created Lumitor Networks, which was providing prepaid renewable energy in what would be about 30 countries around the world. And the idea of the prepaid model, most people are familiar with prepaid cell phones. For those folks who don't have any kind of credit history, you can get a prepaid cell phone where you pay a little bit in advance, you charge it up essentially, and then you have service. We use the same model with a low-cost prepaid electricity meter that we would sell to renewable energy partners in the developing world to allow them to extend their reach to these off-grid markets. And that, as well as the payment mechanism using mobile money with the use of cell phones, people were able to pay for their power as they used it. And the installers of those energy systems were then able to recuperate their investment into serving low-income markets, because that's always been the problem, right? It's like, well, you want to be able to extend service, your product or your service, to low-income markets, but unless they have a mechanism to pay for it, there's no business there. There's no way to serve those markets profitably. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, the real challenge of serving emerging markets is how can we aggregate demand in such a way that we can serve it profitably? And the additional piece that micro franchising adds to that is pushing ownership down to those who are actually doing the work. And that's the beauty of the micro franchise and franchise model more generally. And so we were able to help electrify the bottom billion with our renewable energy metering service that allowed people to serve those markets profitably and recuperate their investments.
That is really cool. That is really cool. Basically, you gave him a battery.
Yeah. Well, even it's really the genius of it, if I could use that word, was really in the payment mechanism more than even a battery or even a solar panel or a micro wind turbine or anything like that. I mean, I'm thinking of a village in North Peru, close to Piura, 10,000 people in a little oceanside village that never had electricity. They're trying to make do with candles and diesel generators and batteries. But what we're bringing is the ability for them to put a solar system or a microgrid into a community, not solar home system there. It was a microgrid setup, but we're able to pay for it bit by bit as money comes in. And I think the payment mechanism is really where the special sauce is because low-income people don't get a regular paycheck. Money comes in fits and starts, a little bit here, a little bit there. And for them to be able to charge up their system, when they had the cash to do it, it was really critical. And that's what we enabled to do. And that really took me all the way until 2017 when our technology was purchased by a German solar manufacturer. And that's when I started Syntropy. So that brings me rather current to where we're at now.
And again, it was another opportunity to create independence and interdependence for another group of people. And I really love that. So tell me a little bit about Syntropy. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. It's funny how things happen in your life. My wife is Indian. She was born in the U.S., but her parents came from India. And I remember way back in like 2013, my mother-in-law asked me. I was talking to her about Lumitor Networks at that time, and I thought, oh, she's going to be so proud of me, right? That I'm building a company that has the capacity to lift her countrymen and other low-income people around the world out of poverty and to provide light, electricity for those who don't have it in off-grid communities around the world. And all of our manufacturing was done in India. And I remember kind of beaming inside going, oh, we found our manufacturer in India. And I thought she's going to say, oh, that's great. You're helping my countrymen to improve their lot in life. And she asked me, I go, isn't that great that I'm doing manufacturing in India? And she goes, why do you have to do it? She's thinking she'd be much happier if I was just an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. And, it's like, why do you have to help these low-income people improve their lot in life? And it's a simple question from a simple woman, admittedly, but it's quite profound at the same time. Why do some of us, and I imagine a lot of people that are listening to this from the entrepreneur community, maybe have asked themselves, or people in their family or friend circle have asked them, why do you have to do business or entrepreneurship the way that you do? Why do we feel compelled to take on, say, some of these bigger challenges in life, or to do more than just look for the next buck, right? Mm-hmm. And it goes back to the awakening experience I had. I think it's an evolution in consciousness that leads us to want to take on the bigger challenges of the world, to be of service to the larger world. Mm-hmm. And, so my stepmom, 10 years ago now, I guess, mother-in-law, 10 years ago, asked that simple question. And I think Syntropy is kind of a way to answer that for me. In a way, it's like, well, I have to do it because of sort of the worldview that was revealed to me through the choices I've made in my life and to my awakening experiences that I've seen. And so what Syntropy is really about, let me define the term, because everybody's like, what is Syntropy anyway? I always define Syntropy as, most people are familiar with entropy, which is kind of the opposite of Syntropy. If entropy is like the winding down of an old-fashioned wind-up clock that starts to lose power slowly over time, unless you're introducing more energetic input into it, that's entropy. That's the winding down of an open system without additional input. Syntropy is the winding up. And what we're really talking about with that is winding up to increasing levels of care, cooperation, compassion. And psychologically, we might call that psychological wholeness, increasing levels of care, concern, compassion, and psychological wholeness is what Syntropy is really about. So how do we wind up? How do we promote Syntropy in business? I believe business can be a force for good in the world. I think it can amplify our best intentions, and I think we can redeem the worst excesses of business, which are easy to point out. And I'm not tone deaf or blinded to the excesses as well. But I also believe, and I imagine most people here in the entrepreneur community concur, that their best offer to the world is when they can bring their heart into the work that they do, and that they can serve a call larger than themselves. I think ultimately all individual human motivation is to serve a call larger than themselves. And what Syntropy does, when I talk about deeper purpose in business to most business leaders, most of them say, well, that sounds good, but what do I do differently first thing Monday morning? And what we've tried to do at Syntropy is to summarize, simplify, and synthesize some of the best thinking out there around personal, interpersonal, and organizational learning and change work so that people can actually do things differently. And these practices range from meditation to purpose discovery to dealing gracefully with conflict, learning how to resolve conflict gracefully at work, to building culture, to consciously building the kind of culture that can support this work, and even finding ways for businesses to positively and purposefully impact the world at large. So all of these things don't just happen. You've got to put repeatable, doable, simple practices into play that leaders and founders and people throughout the organization of varying sizes can actually engage in on a regular routine basis. And I think what makes Syntropy different is between 70 and $90 billion is spent every year in the US alone on corporate learning and change initiatives. Yet only 10 to 20% of that investment actually results in performance change on the job. And by my simple math, that's at least a $50 billion a year waste of money, not to mention the fact that the problem that it was intended to resolve goes unresolved. So I think we can do better. I know we can do better. And what I've created with my companion toolkit of 33 practices, currently 33, but it's open-ended, we hope to add more, is to reduce the complexity of change, again, at the personal, interpersonal, and organizational level, such that people can actually engage and be successful. And that's what Syntropy is about. It's about teaching those practices to really help people grow and evolve and enable people to find deeper purpose through the work and positively impact the world.
Okay, so there was a lot of juicy stuff in there. And one of the things that I heard, and you can tell me if I'm understanding this correctly.
Yeah.
I'm using your own words to play with this. It sounds
Sure.
to me like what you're wanting to do is micro franchise inside of organizations.
Well, I mean, the notion of ownership, micro franchising is about, that was one example of me promoting the power of business to be a force for good in the world in emerging markets. My focus now is less about creating micro businesses within smaller organizations, but rather to take conscious founders and leaders and say, how do you bring your values to work every day to enable your business to be a force for good in the world? So it's a slightly different focus. One, the emerging market work that I did for 10 years as a social entrepreneur was really focused on low-income entrepreneurs. I'm working more now with everyone from nonprofits, Fortune 500 companies, and everything in between to help give them the tools that they need to actually make purpose-based change real within their companies by actually creating, not, you may have gone to a really great lecture over the weekend, or maybe you did a 3-day offsite kind of seminar type thing, or maybe you've done a 3-month certificate program somewhere and it was really amazing. But so many of the times what people have is a binder that sits on a bookshelf collecting dust. And what you need in the moment of, for instance, let's say I'm a mid-level manager at a Fortune 500 company, and I know I have a challenging conversation with one of my team members in 5 minutes. And I read a 300-page book on something called difficult conversations or nonviolent communications, 6 months ago. But I have to remember, what are the 5 or 6 kind of key steps that I have to think about before I go into that meeting with this person, so that I can bring my wisest, most compassionate version of myself to that meeting. Well, you can grab the toolkit where it's just a 2-sided card, essentially, that's formatted to be printed out like a little quick reference card to say, what's the why, what's the what, the why, and the 5 to 7 steps that are part of having to sort of diffuse a challenging situation. That's actually usable in the moment. My wife's a senior executive at a high-tech company here in Silicon Valley. And she goes, well, your books and all of that are great, but in the moment of truth, when she's got to put it to work, the toolkit of practices that I put together is kind of more useful when you need it, right? When you've got 5 minutes to prep for a meeting, you can look at what the key steps are and actually allow that to help you make change effectively in the company. And that's what my toolkit, my companion toolkit to the book, is really all about, and who I'm focused on now.
I like that. And I know some of the most forward moving organizations are ones where their people have a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit in them.
Sure.
And so kind of what I'm hearing is you want to put the social entrepreneurs in those organizations. You want those people to be operating from that kind of contribution place of being, we are getting close to the end of our time, and I really want to make sure people understand, why is it a value, and do they really want to get your book, From Money to Meaning, Building Purposeful Business for a Life of Contribution? Give me a quick why for that book.
Well, as I outlined, most learning and change initiatives fail in corporate life. And the key to making change last is to recognize that change happens from the inside out, from the individual to the collective. And my basic change model, if I could leave someone with a useful organic metaphor of the book and the work that I do at Centropy, is purpose is the seed. Leaders are farmers. Culture is the soil. And impact, positive impact in the world, is the fruit. And in order for you to be able to harvest the fruit of impact, you need to consider change in all of these dimensions. And I offer an inside-out version of change where I talk about 7 shifts that go through. We need to wake up to spirit. We need to grow up in mind. We grow down in soul. We clean up our psyche and shadow, that bag of stuff that the guy who's focused on men's work, Robert Bly, calls that black bag of junk that we drag behind us. We need to clean up our internal world such that we can then show up embodied in life and at work to serve a noble call and this is a good one and important for those of us, especially who've grown up here in the West, to surrender, to let go and let come. So much of us are taught to strive, but we never know how to really arrive and to let go and let come, especially when we're willing to play a bigger game and take a longer view, which is my invitation to conscious founders and leaders, to play a bigger game and take a longer view. If you're going to take on some of these big issues, for me, it was developing world poverty, you're most likely going to fail. I mean, and so you have to learn how to orient yourself to being true to your own North Star of deeper purpose, especially in these tumultuous times that we live in. It's something we can lean on, and we can allow that to guide us through whatever storms we have in front of us. And through that, we can have lives of deeper purpose and contribute maximally to building a better world, independent of outcome. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a good reason to get the book and see if that helps. Now, I know you have a free webinar available, and I want to share it with our community. Can you tell me a little bit about that, please?
Sure. On August 10th, I have a webinar coming up called The 3 Keys to Plugging into Purpose at Work. It's at 11 a.m. Pacific, and we'll include links to that in the comment section at the end of this. But this is an opportunity for people to really get a feel for how we go from the idea of purpose to how do we actually plug it into work on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. And for those who attend, I'm look forward to offering the free toolkit of 33 practice summaries that I've put together around personal, interpersonal, and organizational practices to really make this stuff accessible. And again, I've summarized and synthesized a ton of material over the last few years. These are essentially the cliff notes that I used myself when I would go into corporate engagements. And so many of my clients were saying, what I want the cliff notes. You were a great presenter. It was a great seminar, but what we really want are the takeaways, because that's what we're going to lean on. And for all those who register for that, I'm happy to offer you the free toolkit of practices if you're willing to join me and learn more.
Excellent. And yeah, and I get the cliff notes things, because sometimes for me, if I can grasp it well enough, then I start getting curious into where I want to dive deeper after that. And so that kind of leads me to my next thing. I know you have an upcoming course. I think the webinar is all important and valuable information for a lot of people, and some people might want to go deeper.
Yeah. Well, I hope they do. My flagship course, Ignite, Your Playbook for Plugging into Purpose at Work, starts September 5th, right after Labor Day. And this is where we go through in 7 sessions, we go through each of those dimensions that I shared with you a bit ago. Wake up, grow up, clean up, show up. Wake up, grow up, clean up, or wake up, grow up, grow down, clean up, show up, serve, and surrender. All these dimensions of our personal and interpersonal life shows up in the work that we do every day. And how do we bring our internal personal life into and have it make friends with our professional selves? And ultimately, we have but one life. And the question is, how do we bring it all together for deeper purpose and impact? And I show you how to do that.
Brilliant. Okay, so we are going to be putting those links in the comments here of this video inside of Heartpreneurs with Terry Levine. So you'll see a ticker across the bottom, because I know a lot of people are going to be watching this on YouTube. Come on over to the community and visit with us. You're going to be able to connect with more heart-based business owners like Grant, like myself, like Terry. I do know that we had an excellent question from Vera inside the group. So we're going to go ahead in there and have a little bit of a conversation with Vera. For those of you who were not able to make it live, hit the hashtag replay and share with us what you got out of this. What made sense for you? What questions do you have? Because Grant's here to answer those for you, and we would love to hear. Thanks so much for your time, Grant. This was fantastic, and I love what you're up to.
Thank you, Velma. I appreciate the opportunity and to come together and share this with fellow entrepreneurs out there. So appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for coming. We'll see you next time on Heartrepreneur TV Live inside of Heartrepreneurs with Terry Levine Facebook group. We want to see you there. Have a brilliant day.